When life finally starts falling into place, love, a home, dreams of the future, reality can shatter it all in a single unexpected evening. He thought he knew his partner down to her very core, believed in their shared tomorrow, and worked tirelessly to build a strong foundation for them both. But a single phrase, "We need some time apart," wiped away everything that once felt eternal. Searching for answers, he encountered betrayal where he least expected it, and found support where he never thought to look. While one woman was tearing down everything they had built, another helped him believe in himself again. How will this battle for his heart and dignity end? In loss or liberation? Forward, into a world where every smile hides pain, and every gesture carries new betrayals, and the chance for rebirth. Greetings, my dear viewer. Please tell me which city and country you're watching this video from. Maybe you're watching me from a small town or a gigantic metropolis. Write about it. Make sure to subscribe to my channel and share this video with your friends. It will make me very happy. Let's get started. Before Jasmine came into my world, I felt satisfied with my autonomy and the direction of my professional life. My late 20s brought career growth and a mounting sense of stability. Although I'd always pictured myself settling down at some point, I never felt compelled to hurry into it. After a few significant relationships, it dawned on me that real partnership is less about perfect compatibility and more about building something lasting together. It was during this period of introspection that Jasmine entered my life. Meeting her turned everything upside down. There was something in the way she carried herself that made me believe we could take on any challenge as a pair. Almost from the start, our discussions gravitated toward our future. Topics like marriage, raising children, and laying a solid foundation as a couple. We both longed for a relationship rooted in reliability, mutual respect, and steadfast support. We ended up marrying later than many of our peers. Jasmine was 31, and I was 28 at the time. That was 6 years ago. Both of us had relished the freedom of our single years, but by the time we committed to life together, we realized we hadn't accumulated much in savings. Long before the wedding, we had open, practical conversations about children, agreeing that, resources permitting, Jasmine would stay home until our youngest started school. We believed a parent's presence could make a meaningful difference for our kids, so we started putting away money whenever we could. Jasmine continued working full-time, while I grabbed every overtime shift available, sometimes doubling up on Fridays and clocking in on Saturdays too. The extra hours paid off. We managed to pay off our house and steadily watched our savings grow. Lately, the idea of starting a family had become a frequent topic, especially since Jasmine was conscious of wanting children before 40, knowing time wasn't on our side. That's why what happened last Thursday night felt completely unreal. Out of the blue, Jasmine turned to me and said, "Kyle, I think we should try being apart for a while." My mind just stalled. All I could say was, "What?" Completely blindsided. If you've ever been unexpectedly left, you know the feeling. The other person seems to have every line rehearsed, and you're left speechless. That was exactly how I felt. Somehow I managed to ask, "Why?" as I tried to make sense of what she was saying. She explained, "I think we both need some space to reconnect with ourselves, to rediscover what we value about each other." She continued, "Let's be honest, Kyle. You aren't as affectionate as you used to be, and sometimes I feel like I'm not appreciated. You're always too tired for us to spend time together. Things just don't feel the same, and honestly, you've gained some weight." She asked, "Don't you think some time apart might do us good?" I was stunned, unable to process how suddenly it was all happening. Looking back, I might have noticed that her language shifted from we to me, but at that moment, I missed it entirely. Then she suggested, "Let's try a month apart, Kyle." She said we could reassess after that. "I'll stay with Whitney. If you need to talk, you can call me, but let's keep visits to once a week. Otherwise, it won't really feel like a separation." "Kyle, I do love you, and I know we'll have the family we want one day. I'm sure that after a month or two, we'll be back where we were." With that, Jasmine picked up her bags and headed for the door. "Don't I have any say in this?" I asked, my voice desperate. Her reply was firm. "I've made up my mind, Kyle." I pleaded with her to stay and talk, and eventually she agreed to sit down. Without thinking, I blurted out, "Jasmine, is there someone else?" She sighed. "Oh, Kyle, I figured you'd ask that. But I love you, and only you. There isn't anyone else. Please don't check my phone, follow me, put a tracker on my car, or hire anyone to watch me. That would mean you don't trust me, and I'd have to reconsider everything." She stood up again, and I instinctively reached out to stop her. "This isn't fair, Jasmine. You've had time to process all this, but for me, it's all hitting at once," I told her, my frustration obvious. "What are you talking about, Kyle?" she responded, for the first time showing a hint of doubt. "You're risking everything we have by making this decision alone," I told her. "I've always treated you as an equal. I'd never make such a major choice without including you." She countered, "But what's the danger, Kyle? We love each other. What harm could come from a brief break? If I find myself missing you before the month ends, I'll come home. And what did you mean by contempt?" Her tone softened, full of concern. I tried to explain, "You're not letting me respond at all. For instance, the reason we don't go out much is that I'm always working overtime on Fridays and Saturdays, something we both agreed would help us get ahead. The growing distance between us is partly just the reality of marriage, and partly because I'm exhausted from work. And as for my weight, you encourage me to take the supervisor role for the extra pay, but it's not as physically demanding." Those were merely the initial impressions that surfaced in my mind during those final moments. "Couldn't you stay a little longer so we could actually sort everything out?" I apologized, replying softly but firmly, "Kyle, I already told Whitney we'd be going out tonight." She gathered her belongings, got to her feet, and quietly made her way toward the exit. All I could manage to say was, "Don't forget, Jasmine, you're still married." She paused at the threshold but didn't turn around, leaving without another word. That night, sleep eluded me, and I woke up feeling utterly depleted and unprepared for the grueling 16-hour shift that lay ahead. No matter how exhausted I was, there was no backing out. My relief supervisor had already arranged for me to cover for him again. My work required constant attention. Any distraction could spell catastrophe. That Friday night, I ended up exactly where I shouldn't have been, narrowly escaping being crushed by a 35-ton loader. Only a desperate leap out of the way saved me, the heat of its exhaust still hot on my skin. The surge of adrenaline was the only thing that kept me going through the end of the shift, along with the hunger gnawing at me since Jasmine had missed her usual Thursday grocery shopping while preparing to leave. By Saturday morning, I clocked in again at 10. Surviving on sandwiches slapped together with almost stale bread. The following night, I grabbed a few basics from a 24-hour convenience store. It was past 11:30 when I got home and noticed the answering machine blinking. Jasmine had left a message. She said she missed me and was grateful I hadn't tried to call, asking that I not get in touch, since she'd be out late once more. Instead of comfort, the message only deepened my resentment. There I was, running myself into the ground, contributing 3 times as much to our savings, while she seemed to be out enjoying herself with no cares at all. That bitterness was a new feeling for me. We spent Sunday in total silence. By Monday, I made up my mind to tell my boss I couldn't keep covering extra shifts. When he asked why, I told him about my close call on Friday. He was genuinely alarmed and immediately agreed that I needed time off. It wasn't until Wednesday that Jasmine finally rang, though she had little to say. Feeling bad for giving her the cold shoulder, I tried to patch things up. On Thursday, after dinner, I stopped by Whitney's with flowers and chocolates as an olive branch. Whitney, who'd been divorced for over a year and remained Jasmine's closest confidant, welcomed me in. I never truly understood what had ended Whitney's marriage, though I could make some guesses. She told me Jasmine was upstairs in the shower, then invited me to take a seat in the living room. While I waited, Whitney sat down beside me, edging closer in a way that unsettled me. I shifted away, but she didn't seem to get the hint. Fortunately, Jasmine appeared before things could get more uncomfortable. I handed Jasmine the gifts, but our exchange was strained and unnatural, so unlike the conversations we used to share. After some stilted pleasantries, Jasmine looked at me and asked, "Did you need something, Kyle?" The question caught me off guard. "No, I just wanted to ask if you'd have dinner with me tomorrow," I replied. "I'm sorry, but Whitney and I already have plans," she answered. "But tomorrow's Friday. You always work Fridays," I reminded her. "That's changed. I quit," she said. I admitted I'd quit too. She looked troubled. "But how will we manage financially?" she asked. "I've realized my health and our marriage are more important," I said, meeting her gaze. "Between work and everything at home, I'm stretched too thin." "When you left that message about going out last Saturday, it hit me how much I was overdoing it. I was so exhausted on Friday that I barely avoided a serious accident at work." Jasmine went pale and wrapped her arms around me. "Promise me you'll be careful," she whispered. "I'm going to need you in a few months." Before we could talk any further, Whitney re-entered, ending the moment. "Sorry, Kyle, but we have to get going. A Tupperware party's waiting," Whitney said. Realizing I wasn't wanted, I made a quick exit. Sometimes a man knows not to overstay. Jasmine walked me to the door, and desperate, I pleaded, "Jasmine, please come home. I miss you." She hesitated, clearly uneasy. "Give it 3 more weeks, Kyle. We'll talk then," she said. The last bit of hope faded as she added, "Take a month off from overtime. Get some rest. We'll still need the extra savings, Kyle." I noticed she'd left the flowers and chocolates on the side as I walked out. Over the next week, Jasmine called twice, sounding upset that I hadn't reached out. I tried to explain that between work, cooking, and the gym, I barely had a spare minute, but she didn't really hear it. The following week, I dropped by on a Tuesday evening. Once again, Jasmine was in the shower when I arrived. Remembering how uncomfortable it had been last time, I avoided sitting on the sofa. Whitney, dressed up and closer than I liked, made me uneasy. When Jasmine finally came downstairs, she too was dressed up, and she seemed awkward. "I should have phoned ahead. If I had, you'd have known we were heading out," she told me. Embarrassed, I was shown out swiftly. As the door closed, I thought I heard laughter inside. I promised myself I wouldn't let myself be put in that position again. For the rest of the week, neither of us made any effort to connect. That Sunday, I found myself alone in the backyard, lifting makeshift weights, lost in my own thoughts. Gradually, I felt my strength returning, a slow but welcome relief. Out of the blue, a pair of arms wrapped around me from behind, and someone pressed their body close. After more than 14 days without so much as a friendly hug, the physical contact was almost soothing, at least until I recognized Whitney's voice, soft and teasing at my ear. "Couldn't resist, handsome," she murmured. Jolted, I untangled myself and faced her, careful to hide how rattled I felt. I offered her some coffee, noting how she wore her usual bold outfit, her top cut low enough to leave little to wonder about. Hoping to regain some personal space, I took a seat as far from her as possible at the kitchen table, but Whitney simply dragged her chair next to mine, close enough for our legs to touch. Our attempts at conversation felt forced and awkward, not exactly my area of expertise. Then she broke the lull. "Aren't you curious about Jasmine?" she asked. "No," I replied evenly. "Jasmine already told me it's none of my business." That only made Whitney's smirk deepen. "She's a bit upset, you know. Thought you'd have come running back by now," she needled. "Sorry, Whitney. That's just not how I'm built," I told her. I reminded her about the time I'd asked Jasmine out when I first got here, how she'd turned me down because she supposedly had plans she never bothered to reschedule. I admitted I couldn't make sense of why we were apart, so I was going to wait it out and see if she came back or if things were truly finished. I had no doubt Whitney would tell Jasmine every word. Her reaction didn't surprise me. Instead of looking troubled, Whitney grinned, sliding her hand up to my thigh. It was clear she was trying to provoke me, but I wasn't about to fall for it. I felt nothing for her emotionally, though I'd be lying if I said she wasn't physically attractive, especially since another button on her shirt had popped open. "You and Jasmine were always such a good couple," Whitney continued, her voice probing for a reaction. "You must really trust her to let her hang out with other guys. Or are you just pretending it doesn't bother you?" Her comment sent a wave of unease through me. Jasmine and I had never actually discussed seeing other people during our separation, but I thought my reminder, "Don't forget you're married," had made things clear. Without a word, I stood up and headed for the backyard. Through the glass door, I spotted Jasmine stretched out on the deck in her bikini, sunbathing. Resolute, I stepped outside. "So, what's this about you and other guys, Jasmine?" I asked, keeping my tone calm. "I haven't been seeing anyone, Kyle," she replied, her voice relaxed. "Last Tuesday, Whitney and I met a couple of guys at a club, danced a bit, and mentioned we might show up again. We ran into them yesterday too, but it wasn't a date." "And last night?" I pressed. "It was innocent, just dancing. They bought us drinks, but nothing happened. No kissing, nothing but dancing," she said. "Since when is it fine for a married woman to dance with other men when her husband's not there?" I asked. She stayed silent. "If you meet up with them again, that's a date, and that's not okay. Jasmine, all of this is really getting to me." I still had no idea what had driven us apart in the first place. "Can we just forget about finishing the month? Why don't you come home now?" "I miss you," I said. "No, Kyle, not yet," she answered, her voice firm. "In fact, I'm thinking it'll be longer than a month. I haven't started feeling the way I used to about you," she admitted, obviously uncomfortable saying it out loud. Out of everything she'd done recently, those words stung the most. I gazed at her for a moment, then turned and walked away. "You could always ask me out again," she called, trying to sound casual. "Maybe you'll have better luck." Without turning back, I said, "Or you could ask me. You know where I'll be." Starting that Monday, Jasmine began phoning the house every evening. Our conversations were short and tense, making it clear she was just checking if I was still there. The thought left me unsettled. That Friday, my call forwarding to my cell worked perfectly. When I answered, I could hear music playing in the background. I was already on my way to Whitney's, but Jasmine's car was missing from her driveway. My suspicion piqued. I drove through the area with all the clubs and bars until I spotted Jasmine's car outside one of the bars. Peering in, I saw her and Whitney sitting together in a booth. Soon after, two other women arrived, Bianca, who I knew, and another woman I didn't recognize. I slipped inside quietly, taking a seat in a dark corner where they wouldn't notice me. As soon as the booth next to theirs emptied, I moved over, keeping my back turned so they wouldn't spot me. With some effort, I managed to catch most of their conversation, led mostly by Bianca. "Conversation? You've lost your mind, Jasmine," Bianca blurted. "Honestly, your Kyle sounds way more romantic than my husband," chimed in a voice I didn't recognize, probably the newcomer. "Yeah, I would have loved even half of what you described from my ex," the stranger added. Whitney jumped in. "Don't you think Jasmine deserves better? I mean, just look at her, she's stunning." "I'm not sure," Bianca replied. The whole situation seemed precarious to me. "How do you manage him, Jasmine? Do you simply give in to whatever he wants? With all those late nights, he's got to be exhausted. Do you spoil him on Sundays, allowing him to sleep in while you attend to his every desire?" "If you were here with me, I would—" Jasmine began softly, her words so quiet I couldn't make out the rest. Their conversation lingered, drifting on for a bit, until Bianca broke in. "That's all? And you still have this guy jumping through hoops?" Right then, someone flicked on the jukebox, and I took the chance to quietly excuse myself to the restroom. When I came back, my booth had been taken by someone else, so I returned to my regular seat at the bar. The crowd had thickened, and I wondered when my friends would finally arrive. Over the next 60 minutes, I saw several men try their luck starting conversations with the women around, but each time, they left disappointed. Just then, I noticed a woman I hadn't seen before approach the bar. To give her space, I made an exaggerated gesture of shifting over. She acknowledged me with a brief smile before ordering 4 drinks. As she waited, she turned toward me, an impish grin on her face. "Is this one of your regular hangouts?" she teased. "Hey, you're stealing my best opening line," I replied with a laugh. "You paused too long, so I had to take over," she shot back, a playful glint in her eye. We bantered for a while, and I caught her subtly checking my left hand, looking for a wedding band. "The conversation at my table is unbearable. Would you mind if I use you as my excuse to escape for a bit?" she said, giving me a conspiratorial smile. "Who would object to spending time with a beautiful woman?" I replied. "But just so you know, I am married, though things aren't exactly great between us right now." She nodded, her smile turning gentle. "I appreciate your honesty. I'm not looking for anything more than a chat, if that's okay with you." A few minutes later, Aubrey picked up her drinks and we continued talking, falling into an easy rapport that lasted the next 90 minutes. Every so often I glanced over at her group, making sure we weren't drawing too much attention. By then, a man had claimed my old booth and was busy buying drinks for the women gathered there. Aubrey turned out to be wonderful company, and soon we were chatting as if we'd known each other for ages. Around 11:30, Bianca wandered over. "You were right. He's cute," she whispered to Aubrey with a wink. "Ready to head out?" "Jasmine's offered us a ride," Bianca said. "It's about time I left anyway. I really enjoyed our conversation, Aubrey," I told her, giving her a light kiss on the cheek. She flushed and handed me her business card as she got up, throwing me a last bright smile. 2 minutes after she left, my phone rang. It was Jasmine, her call coming through our home line. "Are you hosting a party at our place?" she asked, suspicion heavy in her voice. "No, I'm at a bar, and I've spent the whole night talking to an attractive woman," I replied, refusing to lie. "Really, Kyle? And what makes you think that's acceptable?" she snapped. "So, it's fine for you to see other people, but I'm not allowed?" I shot back. "You don't get that privilege while you're still married to me." "I expect you to act like it," she fired back. "So, you weren't calling me from a bar earlier?" I pressed. There was a pause. "Well, yes," she admitted, her reluctance plain. "And those guys you mentioned before, none of them actually showed up, did they?" My questions seemed to trip her up. "No, yes, maybe," she fumbled. "Kyle, I already told you I'm not dating anyone," her voice trembling a bit. "Jasmine, can't we just stop all this? Please, just come home. I'll be waiting," I said, my voice softer now. She hesitated before replying. "No, Kyle, I'm not ready for that," she answered quietly. "Okay, then at least come back for tonight," I pleaded once more. "No, Kyle, I'm sorry. I'll call you later," she finished, and the line went dead. The hours dragged on, and as I was about to fall asleep, I heard the garage door opening. My heart leapt, hoping Jasmine was finally back, but as I looked outside, I realized her car was parked across the street. When the garage closed again, it was clear. She had only come by to see if I was home, then drove away. Defeated, I crawled back into bed, my mind churning. The following Saturday, Whitney stopped by. I confronted her about Jasmine's recent actions, but she insisted she didn't know anything, though her response didn't ring true. "What's going on, Whitney?" I asked, keeping my distance as she moved closer. "I'm married to your best friend." "For now, Kyle," Whitney said, feigning innocence. "I just wanted to know if there would be a chance for us if Jasmine ever decided to leave." Her words sounded ridiculous, but they only confirmed what I'd begun to suspect. "Or do you mean if Jasmine leaves me?" I asked her. I apologized and told her, "Of course, Kyle." She didn't seem fully convinced, her response neutral as she sensed my unease. I walked her to the exit, picking up on her reluctance to actually leave, even going so far as to offer to put together a picnic for us. Eventually, I had to be upfront about how inappropriate her behavior was before she finally seemed to understand and went on her way. As she was stepping out, she paused to ask, "Are you and Jasmine going out tonight?" My reply was, "Probably," but my irritation was obvious in my tone. After she left, I decided to ring up Aubrey. Aubrey sounded genuinely glad to hear from me, but she mentioned she wasn't available that evening. "What about Tuesday?" she suggested. I made sure to clarify, "Just as friends, Aubrey. I'm dealing with a complicated situation right now, but I really enjoyed our time the other night." I wanted to avoid giving her any mixed signals. "Kyle, I understand," she said with warmth. "I like talking with you too. Let's do Tuesday." Monday marked the beginning of a new pattern with Jasmine. She started calling me at 6 in the morning, then again after work at 6 in the evening, and once more before bed. Jasmine claimed it was because she missed me, yet she continued to refuse to come home. It was becoming clear that her calls were more about keeping tabs on me than anything else. On Wednesday, I noticed there was a message on the answering machine at home. It was just a telemarketer, but it caught my attention. The call hadn't been forwarded to my cell like usual. Curious, I checked and found that the call forwarding had been switched off. That could only mean someone had been at the house. Tuesday evening, I met Aubrey at her place and we headed out for dinner. She looked stunning, as always. Once we were settled at the restaurant, I decided to ask her something a bit more personal. "Would you mind telling me why things are so complicated for you?" I asked, genuinely interested. Aubrey smiled, hesitating a moment before she answered. "Sure. It's because of Danielle," she finally said. Danielle, it turned out, was Aubrey's 3-year-old daughter. The child's father had left, deciding that family life wasn't for him. That night, Aubrey's mother was watching Danielle so Aubrey could go out. Wanting to steer the conversation away from my own complicated situation, I brought up her night at the bar. "You mentioned the conversation at your table was awful." "What happened?" I asked. Aubrey let out a sigh. "It was just empty chatter with people I had nothing in common with," she said. "There was a woman there named Jasmine. She and her husband are separated, but she's hoping that the time apart will inspire him to pursue her more, be more romantic, all of that. The strange part is, from what she said, her husband already sounds like a really good man," Aubrey explained. I frowned. "Good? How so?" She said he brings her flowers every week, plans a date night every month, treats her kindly. Even when he works late on Saturdays, he still gets up early on Sundays to make her breakfast. He even surprised her with a cruise last year. Honestly, if my ex had done half that, I would have been thrilled, Aubrey said, shaking her head in disbelief. "It's wild how some people can't appreciate what they have. And it gets weirder," she continued. "Before their separation, she tried to provoke his jealousy. Want to know how?" I nodded. She'd come home late after going out, deliberately wearing men's cologne. One time, she even got a pair of used underwear from her friend Whitney, can you imagine? And left them out in their bedroom, hoping her husband would find them. But he never said anything, Aubrey recounted, both amused and baffled. "Maybe he just didn't notice," I joked, trying to keep things light. "Or maybe he cared about her so much, he chose to ignore it," Aubrey suggested. But since none of her tactics worked, she and her friend cooked up the idea of a trial separation, thinking it would make him desperate for her, but he hasn't responded at all. "Honestly, good for him," I remarked. "Exactly," she agreed. When he didn't react, they doubled down. Jasmine stopped communicating with him completely, and when he kept ignoring her, her friend suggested she start seeing other men, or at least pretend to. Still, he didn't budge. I respect the guy, honestly. That's exactly what I'd do if someone tried that kind of manipulation on me, Aubrey said sympathetically. The sad thing is, when Bianca, Another friend asked Jasmine how much effort she had put into her marriage. It was the first time Jasmine seemed to realize just how unbalanced things were. You'd think that would have snapped her out of it, but it didn't. Now they're stuck, all because her husband refuses to play along with their scheme, Aubrey said, her voice thoughtful. She could just go back, be honest, and try to fix things, I suggested. Yeah, I think deep down that's what she wants. But I also think her friend is holding her back. Whitney kept shooting her these strange, almost predatory glances last Friday, Aubrey mused. Do you think her friend is trying to sabotage the marriage so she can go after the husband herself? I asked. You might be onto something, Aubrey said, her gaze sharpening as she weighed the idea. That lines up with what I've observed too, but if it's true, she must be incredibly strategic, even a bit cold. As our meals arrived, we naturally shifted the conversation toward happier topics, though I couldn't shake the heaviness on my conscience. When our plates were cleared away, I felt the urge to be honest. Aubrey, after hearing you out, I'm convinced you're a person of real character, I said, carefully searching for the words. She smiled warmly in response. Then I took a breath and asked, Do you believe I'm a decent person? Bracing for her answer. I do, Aubrey replied immediately. I trust my gut when it comes to people, and I truly think you have a good heart. Steeling myself, I knew I had to reveal the truth. There's something you should know, I began, softly taking her hands. I hope you can forgive me, Aubrey. I haven't been completely forthright with you. Lately, uncertainty has clouded my judgment, and I've made some poor choices, but I respect you too much to keep hiding this. Aubrey's expression grew solemn, clearly concerned. My actual name is Kyle, I admitted, and for 6 years, I've been married to a woman named Jasmine. About a month ago, against my wishes, Jasmine pushed for a separation. Just tonight, someone I met recently told me it might be time to move on from the hurt and disrespect she's caused, and I'm starting to think you were right all along. I treated Jasmine like she was precious, but in hindsight, I see now that she gave back very little. Aubrey's face flickered with emotion before her eyes widened in shock and she covered her mouth with her fist. Oh my God. Did I really call your wife an idiot? She asked, looking mortified. Truthfully, it stung to hear you talk about her like that, I answered, keeping my tone neutral. She seemed to relax a little, though her eyes were still troubled. The fact that your first thought was whether you'd hurt me says a lot about who you are. I forgive you, of course, I assured her, hoping to ease the awkwardness. Aubrey looked visibly relieved, but a hint of discomfort remained. Is that why you reached out to me last Friday night? She asked. Were you hoping to get some information? I paused, considering her words, then nodded. You caught me off guard, but yes. Still, do you think I can rely on your support while I work through this? Of course, Kyle. But I want to be clear. I won't take part in sabotaging your marriage, she said, her tone unwavering. Thank you. Right now, I just need your friendship. I explained how I'd assumed everything in my marriage was fine until Jasmine suddenly dropped the news of the separation one Thursday. She was planning to leave without any explanation, but I insisted on knowing why. Even after she told me her reasons, I still feel completely lost. My job and my relationship with Jasmine have always come first, so I don't have a big circle of friends, I admitted. Aubrey listened closely, then asked, Do you think you and Jasmine might get back together? I honestly don't know, I replied. Part of me feels like forgiving her after all this would be letting myself down. And talking with you has made me realize just how uneven things have been between us, especially when it comes to intimacy. It's hard to admit, but it's the truth. After that, we seemed to silently agree to change the subject, and spent the rest of the evening enjoying lighter conversation. Eventually, Aubrey said she needed to head home to relieve her mom, who was watching Danielle. I had a wonderful time tonight, Aubrey said, as we stood outside her apartment building. Me too, I replied, giving her a quick kiss on the cheek before saying goodnight. The next morning, as I was on my way to the store, I heard my name called from a nearby cafe. Turning, I spotted Jasmine, Whitney, and another woman sitting together. My stomach dropped as I recognized Bianca at the table. Bianca's shock was unmistakable. Her eyes went wide as soon as she saw me. In that instant, I realized Jasmine would soon know I'd been watching her, and that her Friday nights hadn't involved any men after all. Depending on what Bianca chose to share, Jasmine might even realize that Aubrey had been confiding in me. To my surprise, I didn't feel as anxious about it as I thought I would. I quickly excused myself, saying I needed to get home to make dinner, and searched Jasmine's face for any sign of guilt. She seemed completely unfazed. That night, just as I was drifting off to sleep around 9:30, the phone rang. Jasmine's voice was cold and accusatory on the other end. "Kyle, didn't I tell you not to spy on me? That just proves you don't trust or respect me," she said sharply. "Jasmine, you're the one who pushed for this separation without giving me real answers. Wouldn't you want to understand what's happening if you were in my place?" I shot back, my irritation seeping through. "You're still going against what we agreed on, Kyle." "That was your decision, not mine," I pointed out, letting the silence stretch, hoping she'd pick up on the difference. Instead, she veered off in a different direction. "Kyle, I'm really struggling to figure things out. This trial separation isn't working out the way I expected. I'm not even sure I have the right feelings for you anymore. I think we should extend this trial for another month or two." She paused, clearly expecting me to respond. I chose to say nothing. If she was hoping for a fight, she wasn't going to get it from me. "Kyle, I know I've skirted around this issue, but it feels necessary to bring it up now," she started, her voice gentle but resolute. "I think I need the space to date other men. Maybe it will help me reconnect with what I feel for you, and remind me of the value in our relationship." There was no doubt in her determination, though her tone remained tender. For once, I didn't choose to hold back. I was simply too stunned to reply. When I finally managed to process what she'd said, I decided it was best to say nothing at all. No words seemed capable of making sense of the chaos between us. "Kyle, are you listening?" she asked, interrupting the uneasy quiet. "Jasmine, I truly think seeing other people is a terrible idea," I eventually managed, my voice controlled and calm. "Let's set this straight. If you decide to pursue anyone else, repeated dates, close dancing, intimacy, or even kissing another man, I'll see it as your choice to end our marriage. Is that understood?" She hesitated before responding, defiance lacing her words. "Kyle, you don't get to make the rules. I'm not some possession of yours," she shot back. "I believe I deserve the love and companionship I've been missing for a long time." For a brief moment, I questioned what she was really thinking. Didn't she realize that turning away from me was exactly why she felt that emptiness? "So this is really the route you want to take?" I pressed, trying to grasp her logic. "You've never given me a reason for this separation that made any sense. At first, I thought maybe you just wanted me to fight for us, but after a while I realized that was too insulting to assume." The line was silent. When she did speak, there was sorrow in her voice. "I'm sorry, Kyle. My decision is final." The defeat in her tone was clear. The call ended, replaced by the hollow dial tone, and it felt like our marriage ended with it. Oddly enough, when I got home Thursday and Friday night, Jasmine's car was parked far down the block, pointed away from the house, almost as if she didn't want to be seen. Minutes later, I'd watch her drive off, deepening the confusion already clouding everything. That Thursday evening, Aubrey called. She forgave me for my previous mistakes, lifting a weight I hadn't realized I was carrying. Afterward, she gently asked what was going on, insisting she was only asking as a friend. I caught her up on Jasmine and shared my guesses about what was driving her actions. "So what now, Kyle?" Aubrey wondered. Are you just going to let her have the final word? I guess so, I replied. Do you want me to keep tabs on her this weekend? She offered. No, Aubrey. I don't want you involved. What if we find out where they are and I go with you? She suggested. No, I'm not going to stoop to that level, but I'd like to see you this weekend. We quickly made plans for a Sunday picnic. Aubrey didn't press for details about my unavailability Friday and Saturday. She seemed to understand without explanation. We ended up talking for almost 2 hours that Friday, and it wasn't difficult to figure out where Jasmine and Whitney had gone. The fact that they returned to the same bar sparked two ideas. Either Jasmine was confident I wouldn't come back, or she was hoping I would. That time, I just watched from outside, feeling a bit ashamed for doing so. To my surprise, Jasmine didn't cross any lines. She, Whitney, and Bianca spent the evening chatting. By about 10, Whitney accepted a few offers to dance, but Jasmine and Bianca didn't join in. Eventually, two men who seemed determined approached Jasmine and Whitney. After Bianca left, the three of them stayed at their table. Throughout the night, Jasmine and Whitney kept glancing around the dark corners of the bar. I was relieved when I saw them both leave together by 11:30. I followed their cab to make sure they got home safely and waited until the lights in their place went out. Saturday, however, was a different story. Once more, they ended up at that same bar, and the same two men were waiting. This time, there was no hesitation. Things fell apart for me the moment Whitney accepted a dance from one of them, leaving the other man to turn his attention to Jasmine. From where I sat, I saw him rest his hand on Jasmine's thigh. I waited, giving her a chance to handle it, watching as she scanned the room several times. That was when I decided to go in. As soon as Jasmine saw me, she moved the man's hand away, at least showing some decency. But there was a smugness in her face as she spoke first. Kyle, I told you not to spy on me again. The man stood up, uncertain whether to confront me or leave. Ignoring social niceties, I stepped in closer. My words were brief and firm. Leave. He did, without protest. Keeping my eyes on Jasmine, I sat down and took out some papers from my jacket. These are the divorce papers, I told her quietly. They're fair for both of us. I've already filled in everything. Just sign where I marked. We'll split everything equally. Since you moved out, I'll keep the house. As I spoke, I watched her smugness dissolve into shock. I didn't wait to see the rest of her reaction. I left quickly, avoiding her gaze, determined not to let her see the turmoil inside me. Still, I couldn't help but sneak one last glance through the window. Jasmine was openly crying. Moments later, Whitney returned, bewildered by the scene she walked into. The instant her eyes fell on the papers scattered across the table, her expression lit up with a broad, genuine grin. For the next hour, Whitney took complete charge of the conversation. In less than a quarter of an hour, Jasmine's tears had vanished, and by the end, she was astonishingly composed. Whitney's charm had clearly done the trick. Somehow, she'd convinced Jasmine that their plan remained safe. That night, I lay awake again, unable to shake the sense that the long-dreaded final showdown was close. Heartache hovered just over the horizon, and no matter how hard I tried, I couldn't put aside my feelings for Jasmine. Knowing Whitney would likely stop by the following day, I made up my mind to pretend I wasn't around when she came knocking. I let her calls go unanswered and sat quietly. Curiously, Jasmine didn't call either. By about 1:30, I found myself standing at Aubrey's front door, clutching a bunch of red roses. The moment Aubrey noticed the flowers, she wrapped me up in a warm hug, providing comfort in the midst of my chaos. I was about to ask how things had been for her lately, but her gaze returned to the roses. I think I already know, she said, a hint of understanding in her voice. She instantly grasped the significance. These weren't casual flowers between friends, not with everything unresolved. She invited me in, and there I met her mother for the first time. Kyle, this is my mom, Beatrix. Mom, meet Kyle, my boyfriend. Aubrey announced, catching me pleasantly off guard. For a second, I was speechless, wondering how much Aubrey had already told her. Sensing my hesitation, Beatrix asked the question everyone was thinking. "So, is it all over?" she said gently. "Everything but the shouting, as my dad used to put it," I replied, bringing them up to speed. I told them Jasmine still hadn't truly grasped the seriousness of it all, and I had to prove I meant what I said. They heard the pain in my voice, and Beatrix came over to offer a consoling hug. Just then, a young girl wandered in, still groggy from her nap. Danielle had woken up. Aubrey introduced us. When Aubrey mentioned that we'd be going out, Danielle's face fell, despite Beatrix's attempts to cheer her. Noticing Danielle's disappointment, I quietly asked Aubrey, "Would it be all right if she joined us?" Aubrey looked at me, slightly taken aback. "Are you sure?" she whispered. "I know you two come together, and that's fine with me," I reassured her. Aubrey's expression softened, her gratitude clear. "That would really mean a lot. I hardly get to see her during the week, so weekends are our special time," she told me. Danielle's mood lifted instantly when she heard she could come along. The three of us spent a wonderful afternoon by the river, basking in the sun and simply enjoying being together. Aubrey made a playful remark about feeling left out, but her laughter told me she was only kidding. After we took Aubrey and Danielle home, Beatrix invited me to stay for a home-cooked meal. I said my goodbyes to Aubrey, kissed her gently on the cheek, and headed out. As I approached my own place, I sensed Jasmine's presence nearby, lurking as she often did. Before I could reach my door, her car rolled up into the driveway. Jasmine stepped out and handed me the divorce documents I'd given her the previous Saturday. "Here you go, Kyle, all signed and witnessed. Good night," she said, catching me off guard. She turned to leave, but tossed out a final challenge. "Now that I've called your bluff, maybe you can take me out for dinner this week." "I'm free Wednesday," she called, then drove off. It hit me just how differently Jasmine saw the situation. If things were heading toward an ending, it was shaping up to be a turbulent one. The real chaos began on Monday night. When I pulled into the driveway after work, I found Whitney waiting there. Before I could react, she kissed me. I quickly pulled away, making myself clear. "Whitney, let's get one thing straight," I said firmly. "I'm not interested in you. Not at all." Before she could respond, Jasmine's car came screeching into the driveway. Whitney tried to get away, but Jasmine's car blocked her escape. Jasmine jumped out, slamming her car door so hard it startled Whitney, who stumbled backward and fell. When Whitney tried to get up, Jasmine struck her hard on the head, knocking her down again. This time, Whitney stayed down, finally realizing she was better off not fighting back. But Jasmine, now aware she'd been played, couldn't hold back her rage. She lashed out, kicking Whitney repeatedly. I knew better than to step in. Jasmine's anger was wild and unrestrained. Only once she started to tire, still seething, did I risk pulling her away. Right then, a police car drove by. Soon, both Jasmine and I were in handcuffs, and an ambulance was called for Whitney's injuries. The officers questioned Jasmine first. I could hear her angry voice echoing through the station. Eventually, they put her in a cell across from mine. When it was my turn, I told the officers the whole story, making it clear that Jasmine had been provoked. It was the least I could do for her. By 11 that night, I was released, the officers apologizing as they let me go. The next morning, I returned to work, relieved to be underground where nothing could reach me. Not even my phone. On my way home, I rang Aubrey to update her on everything. She invited me for dinner and added a sweet invitation from Danielle as well. "Would you mind if Kyle, the gentle soul, told me a story before bed tonight?" I was running behind schedule when I stopped by Whitney's parents' place. There, I revealed what I'd found out about Whitney's role in shaping Jasmine's recent behavior. Strangely enough, her parents didn't seem surprised in the slightest. I asked if they could persuade Whitney to drop any charges she might file against Jasmine, and they promised to try their best. Returning home, I saw Jasmine's car in the garage. Upstairs, her luggage was unpacked, and the sound of running water echoed from the bathroom. Realizing what might be about to happen, I lingered downstairs and called Aubrey to call off our dinner plans. Together, we speculated about Jasmine's intentions, but nothing could have prepared us for what unfolded. Jasmine descended the stairs with a look of resolve, and an uneasy feeling washed over me. "So, Kyle, what's for dinner tonight?" she inquired. I paused, uncertain how to answer, as she stepped closer. "I've decided to forgive you, Kyle," she announced. "We both made errors. Let's put them behind us. I'm here to stay. If you haven't figured out dinner yet, let's just go out," she continued. I was stunned, unable to mask my confusion. "Forgive me? Jasmine? What is it you think I've done?" For the first time, I saw her confidence waver. "For the pain you caused with the whole divorce fiasco, Kyle. It was harsh, but I always thought you didn't truly mean it." "And why are you so sure I was just pretending, Jasmine?" I pressed. She started to respond. "Because Whitney," but suddenly faltered as the truth dawned on her. She sat down heavily, color draining from her cheeks. I watched in silence as she processed this new reality. Eventually, her voice barely above a whisper, she spoke. "I let you slip away, didn't I? You weren't bluffing about the divorce. I assumed you were, which is why I signed." I shook my head, my heart heavy. "To be clear, Jasmine, you didn't simply let me go. You threw me away. I always tried to do right by you, but what did I get in return? I was left feeling lost and forsaken. I warned you about the risks. After all I poured into our relationship, I thought I at least deserved respect and loyalty. But instead, I was left alone and forgotten. Have you thought about how unbalanced things have been between us lately? I've been the only one trying for the past 5 weeks." Jasmine's reply was barely audible. "No. You let someone else convince you that you deserved better. Don't worry, Whitney's influence is over now," she added. "This was never about Whitney. I always saw through her games. She was never anything but manipulative to me," I replied. "So we're all right now, Kyle?" There was a fragile hopefulness in her voice. That was the moment of truth. "No, Jasmine. Things aren't okay. The divorce papers are proof enough. I can't erase the disrespect or the threats. When you abandoned me, someone else was there to help me back up." Jasmine stared at me, her expression torn between disbelief and shock. For the first time in a long while, it seemed she truly understood the consequences of her choices. She shook her head slowly, her voice trembling. "You can't mean that, Kyle. You're just saying this to hurt me. I know you wouldn't." "I'm not trying to hurt you, Jasmine," I interrupted softly. "I never wanted any of this to happen. But it's clear now that we've been living apart in spirit for some time. I kept hoping things would get back to the way they were. But you continued to push me away," I went on, as she lowered herself onto the sofa, hands shaking. "I only signed those papers because I thought you weren't serious, that it was just a test, just as I was testing you." With a deep breath, I let go of the tension I'd been carrying. "This was never a game to me, Jasmine. All I wanted was to fix things, to understand what you were feeling. Instead, you walked away from us and everything we'd built together." She looked down, and for an instant, I caught a glimpse of the person I'd once loved, my friend, my confidant. But that part of her seemed buried, hidden by regret and pride. "I never stopped loving you, Kyle," she choked out. "I still do." I closed my eyes, struggling to steady myself. "That's not enough anymore, Jasmine. Love without trust or respect means nothing. You made me feel like I was the only one fighting for our marriage, and I realize now I don't want that." Tears filled her eyes, and for the first time, she seemed truly exposed. "I never thought it would end like this," she whispered. "I figured if I challenged you, you'd try even harder to save us. I never expected you to actually let go." I knelt beside her, my resolve firm despite the sadness. I didn't just let go, Jasmine. You kept pushing me away. I stayed as long as I could, but eventually, I had to think about my own happiness, what I want and deserve from a partner, and I deserve more than what you've offered these past months. She wiped the tears from her cheeks with trembling fingers, her breath coming in shallow bursts. Was it her fault? Was the new woman in my life to blame? I paused, then offered a faint nod. No, Jasmine, she wasn't the reason for our breakup. What happened between us was just that, about us. Still, meeting her made me realize I couldn't keep pretending to be content as someone's second choice. She helped me see that I deserved a relationship where I mattered, where love wasn't something to be fought over. Jasmine rose abruptly, her face tightening as she struggled to contain her emotions. So this is how it ends? You're walking away? After all our memories, all the plans we made together, you're ready to abandon it for a woman you barely know? My chest tightened as the distance between us became painfully clear. I'm not erasing our past, Jasmine. I'm simply choosing to let go and move forward. And honestly, I think you should too. The relationship we've been holding on to, what's left of it, has turned toxic. It's done us both harm. Jasmine started pacing, anxiety etched across her features as she threaded her fingers through her hair. I thought we still had time, she murmured. I thought we could fix this. We had all the time we could have wanted, Jasmine, but you kept me at arm's length instead of opening up. You pushed me away when all I wanted was to be close. And now it's too late. The finality in my voice was unmistakable. It settled between us like a weight. At last, Jasmine stopped moving, her shoulders slumping in defeat. I never imagined it would end like this, she whispered, her voice barely above a breath. I never planned to lose you. I stood up, sensing that it was time for both of us to find closure. Maybe one day you'll understand why things had to end as they did. But for now, we have to accept that this is over. We've hurt each other too much to try again. She looked into my eyes one last time, searching for any sign of hope, any suggestion we could mend what was broken. But I had nothing left to offer. Not anymore. As I moved toward the door, her voice shook as she called out to me. What do I do now, Kyle? Where do I go from here? I hesitated at the doorway, hand resting on the knob. You need to discover who you are without me, I said softly. And I have to do the same. Without saying another word, I stepped outside, closing the door quietly behind me. The evening breeze was cool against my skin, and for the first time in a long while, I felt a sense of peace. The chaos that had consumed me was finally behind me, and even though the future was uncertain, one thing was clear. I was free. As I settled into my car, my phone buzzed. It was a message from Aubrey. Looking forward to seeing you tonight. Danielle's waiting for her story before bed. A gentle smile touched my lips. I sent a quick reply, started the engine, and drove off, toward something honest, something real. For the first time in what seemed like forever, hope sparked within me. Whatever awaited me next, I was ready. The first story ends here, but an even more intriguing one is just ahead. Stay with us. Let's jump right in. Her laughter hit me like a blade, sharp, chilling, and devoid of warmth. It bore no resemblance to the soft, melodic laugh that had first captivated me in that sunlit cafe all those years ago. No, this was something else entirely, laced with scorn, nearly cruel in its delight. From the doorway of our bedroom, I gripped the severance letter so tightly my knuckles whitened, watching as my wife of 6 years tapped rapidly at her phone, her eyes never leaving the glowing screen. The icy blue light carved hard angles into her features. A smile curved her lips, a smile that hadn't been directed at me in what felt like ages. I stood there stunned as Sarah let out a fresh burst of laughter, her thumbs dancing over the glass. Can you believe Mark's latest excuse for getting axed? Restructuring, As if anyone buys that. Hopeless. She sent the message with a dismissive flick. Each word landed with the force of a physical blow. Barely an hour ago, I'd been let go from Vertex Technologies, a company I'd given 8 years of relentless effort, late nights, missed birthdays, endless ambition. Now, my own wife wasn't just unmoved by my loss. She was mocking me behind my back. I couldn't move, only watch as she continued her conversation. Don't worry about tonight. He'll probably be sulking somewhere. Swing by at 8. I need a break from his dramatic meltdown. In that moment, something inside me fractured and realigned. The hurt was almost unbearable, but out of that agony emerged a colder, calculating focus. Wordlessly, I slipped away from the doorway and headed downstairs, my mind already assembling the blueprint for what would be my most elaborate act of payback. I'd always had a talent for staying 3 steps ahead, strategizing like a chess master. At Vertex, they'd called me the calculator for my uncanny knack for predicting the next move. Now, that same skill would serve a different purpose. About an hour later, Sarah entered the kitchen to find me sitting at the island, laptop open, feigning an air of defeat as I updated my resume. I wore a mask of vulnerability and confusion. "Hey," I said, making sure my voice trembled just enough. "I need to talk to you." She placed a hand on my shoulder, a gesture that, to any outsider, might look supportive. But I felt the tension in her grip, spotted the quick flash of irritation before her face softened into a display of concern. "I got laid off today," I told her. "Budget cuts. They're calling it restructuring." I studied her closely, noting how effortlessly she mimed shock and sympathy. 6 years together had trained me to detect even the faintest flicker of deception. "Oh, Mark, that's terrible," she replied, her voice an imitation of heartfelt worry. "But maybe it's a blessing in disguise. You've been burning the candle at both ends for too long." I nodded, keeping up my role as the grateful, wounded husband. "Yeah, I guess you could look at it that way. At least the severance is decent. 3 months' salary, plus my equity." There it was, a brief, almost imperceptible glint in her eye. Money always drew her attention, no matter how hard she tried to conceal it. I'd witnessed that same spark whenever bonuses were discussed or someone flashed a new luxury purchase. "Well, at least you got something out of it," she said, her tone shifting to practicality. "What's next for you?" "I'll start reaching out to people soon. Might take a couple of days to clear my head first," I replied. She nodded, already pulling away emotionally, her thoughts drifting to her 8 o'clock plans. "I'm sure you'll bounce back," she offered, her encouragement ringing hollow. "Actually, I need to stay late at the office tonight. Big project deadline." I smiled reassuringly, playing my part perfectly. "No problem. Don't overdo it." As she left the room, shoulders visibly easing, a wave of realization swept through me. Our marriage had been unraveling for far longer than I'd been willing to admit. The signs had been there for months: odd hours, abrupt changes in her online habits, the growing distance between us. But even the most vigilant can be blinded by hope. Not anymore. Now, I saw everything with merciless clarity. By sunrise, my plan was in motion. As Sarah showered, I quietly transferred half of our joint savings, $75,000, into an account she knew nothing about. It was all above board. My name was on the paperwork too. I considered it an investment in retribution. Over the next week, I maintained the appearance of an earnest job seeker, but behind the scenes, I reconnected with former investors from my Vertex days. Brandon Weiss came to mind first. He'd always told me to call if I ever wanted to try something daring. We met for lunch at a chic restaurant downtown. "Mark Richardson," he greeted me, "the calculator himself. Sorry to hear about Vertex. Big mistake on their part." I presented my proposal, tailored to appeal to both Brandon's business acumen and his flair for intrigue. My target, Elysium Analytics, Sarah's firm. not for their reputation, but because I knew they were vulnerable and primed for a takeover. I know where their weak spots are, I explained, cloaking my real intentions beneath a layer of analysis. Their security division is hemorrhaging cash, but the data analytics arm is a potential goldmine. With the right leadership, their market share could triple in less than 2 years. Brandon studied me, searching for my true motive. There's more to this than business, isn't there, Mark? I met his gaze, steady and unflinching. Business is always personal, Brandon. That's what separates the successful from the rest. He grinned, recognizing the determination in my eyes. All right, he said. My interest had been thoroughly sparked. I started asking around discreetly, and in just 2 weeks, I had secured $4 million in venture funding. Brandon brought in 2 more investors, each convinced they were making a savvy move in the market. None of them had a full understanding of the true situation. That wasn't necessary for our purposes. The acquisition unfolded quietly, coordinated through a web of shell corporations and intermediaries. Because Elysium was a private entity, the transaction was more complicated, but also allowed for a greater degree of confidentiality. Ownership rested with the original founders and a select group of private investors, many of whom were already seeking an exit strategy. Meanwhile, I continued to play the role of the dutiful, out-of-work spouse. I made appearances at networking events, arranged interviews I had no intention of pursuing, and came home every evening with tales of potential job leads. Sarah seemed only partially engaged, her attention divided between her phone and her own professional obligations. Our daily interactions settled into a kind of scripted monotony. We shared dinner a couple of nights a week, exchanged surface-level updates, and retired to bed with an ever-widening emotional gulf between us. The key distinction was that Sarah maintained the illusion, while I had long since seen through it. One night, as she hurried to leave for yet another late work meeting, I decided to dig a little deeper. I casually suggested the idea of dipping into our savings so I could start a consulting venture, framing it as a temporary measure. She paused, a brief flash of guilt visible before she regained her composure. I don't think that's a good idea right now, she replied. She insisted we should be prudent with our money until I found a new position. I nodded, pretending to seriously consider her reasoning. That's reasonable, I said. I did notice our joint account balance is a bit lower than I expected. My act went off without a hitch. She looked momentarily rattled but quickly recovered. I moved some money to pay off my credit card, meant to tell you sorry. It was just another small lie to add to the growing pile. In truth, I already knew exactly where the money was going. Lavish getaways masked as business trips, expensive presents for her lover, hotel stays for nights that were never about work. I had been monitoring her credit card transactions online, thanks to a password she never suspected I had. The evidence was undeniable, but I wasn't ready to confront her just yet. Not quite yet. By the end of the second month, the acquisition was nearly complete. Through a network of holding companies, I controlled a 42% interest in Elysium Analytics. Brandon and his associates held another 15%, promising to support my decisions at board meetings. The rest of the shares were dispersed among parties with little interest, effectively granting me control of the company. At home, the charade persisted. Sarah grew more distant, less careful with her fabrications. Twice she didn't return until the next morning, offering flimsy excuses about dozing off at Jen's after a late night at the office. I pretended to accept these explanations, quietly cataloging each one in preparation for the inevitable confrontation. The timing of my final move had to be flawless. A network of contacts, former colleagues now employed at Elysium and administrative staff willing to exchange information for generous gift cards, fed me updates. I learned that Sarah was misusing company assets for her affair. She sent emails from the company server, used the corporate apartment, and disguised personal expenditures as business-related. These actions violated numerous clauses in her contract. I also uncovered the identity of her lover, David Callan, Elysium's VP of Product Development, a married father, and the very person responsible for Sarah's recent advancement. Everything was falling into place. On a Wednesday in late October, exactly 3 months after I'd left Vertex, Elysium's board gathered for a special session. Until that point, I had kept my involvement hidden behind lawyers and proxies, keeping my status as majority owner a secret. But that was about to change. That morning, Sarah left the house in her finest charcoal suit, the one she wore for occasions that mattered. She appeared anxious, unsettled by the surprise meeting, yet hopeful it might bring her good news. "Best of luck today," I said as she collected her things. "You'll do great." She barely acknowledged me, muttering a distracted, "Thanks, don't wait up." "We'll probably go for drinks afterward to debrief," she added. I managed to keep my expression neutral. "No problem, take your time." I made sure to arrive at Elysium's headquarters an hour before the board meeting began. Brandon met me in the lobby, his demeanor a mix of amusement and admiration. "You're about to make quite the splash," he said, straightening his tie. "Are you certain you want to go through with this? We could keep the current management. Change is always disruptive." I adjusted the platinum cufflinks on my wrists, an anniversary gift from Sarah. "Sometimes disruption is exactly what's called for," I answered. "Trust me." The boardroom was perched on the 30th floor, its windows offering a sweeping view of the city. I took the chair at the head of the table, back to the entrance, as board members gradually filed in. They'd only been told that the principal shareholder was coming forward to announce leadership changes. At precisely 2 p.m., the door opened one final time. I heard a sharp intake of breath, followed by a heavy silence that told me Sarah had arrived and seen me. I let the moment linger, picturing her reaction, before finally turning to face her. "Come in, Sarah." My tone was calm as I welcomed her. "Thank you for joining us. Please, have a seat." She paused at the threshold, clearly unnerved and looking almost ghostly. "Mark," she whispered, shock written all over her face. "You didn't expect to see me, did you?" I motioned toward the board members, who exchanged uncertain glances at the unexpected drama. "I'm presiding over this meeting as Elysium Analytics' newly appointed CEO and majority stakeholder." Addressing the group, I clarified, "In case it's not common knowledge, Sarah Richardson is my wife. She's just now discovering that her professional and personal lives have collided." Sarah finally took her seat, posture stiff and unsettled, her eyes locked onto mine. I could sense her thoughts churning, searching for a way out, or at least a strategy to limit the damage. Part of me, the strategist, respected her effort to keep it together. Another part, deeply hurt, remained icy and resolved. Regaining focus, I addressed the room. As I was saying, Elysium faces a defining crossroads. Our company possesses tremendous potential but is not without serious challenges. Over the next hour, I will lay out a comprehensive restructuring plan to capitalize on our strengths and address our weaknesses. I launched into my presentation, displaying an intimate knowledge of Elysium's financials, operations, and place in the market. Gradually, the skepticism among the board members turned into genuine interest as I revealed inefficiencies and proposed tangible remedies. Sarah sat in silence throughout, her initial shock slowly shifting into a barely controlled anger. Once I'd covered every agenda item, I turned my focus to her. "There's one last issue to discuss." I looked her in the eye. "Ms. Richardson, as our head of marketing strategy, you've been instrumental in shaping Elysium's public image. Unfortunately, you've also been involved in activities that violate company policy and put us at considerable risk." I produced a folder, sliding it across the table in her direction. Inside were printed copies of emails, detailed expense reports, and access logs, carefully compiled and annotated. The file presented a consistent record of rule-breaking, misusing company resources, repeated breaches of our code of conduct, and fostering a toxic work culture through an inappropriate relationship with a direct report. I turned to our legal counsel. a veteran lawyer whose silver hair gave her a distinguished air. These documents constitute ample grounds for immediate termination, according to Section 7.3 of our employee policies. She reviewed the evidence with a neutral expression, then gave a succinct nod in agreement. "Mr. Richardson's assessment is correct," she said. "If the contents are verified, these infractions warrant dismissal under our regulations." At last, Sarah found her voice, her words shaking with indignation. "This is absurd. You're using the company as a tool for your own vendetta. I'll take legal action for wrongful termination." I didn't react. "The evidence is clear, Sarah. But if you'd like, we can go over the details, including your relationship with David Callan and your misuse of company funds to finance your affair." The mention of David's name sent a ripple through the boardroom. He was respected at Elysium, and his domestic life was often discussed. Sarah's face flushed, a mix of fury and humiliation. "You set all this up just to get back at me. For what, exactly?" I stopped her with a steady, cold voice. "For betraying me? For mocking me after my layoff? For the lies you spun every day? No, this isn't retribution. I did what I had to because Elysium deserves ethical leadership, not personal schemes. As CEO, it's my duty to address these matters." I faced the board again. "If there are no objections, I propose that we terminate Sarah Richardson's employment at Elysium Analytics, effective immediately." The vote was quick and unanimous. Even Brandon, who had seemed skeptical at first, supported the decision. It was less about outrage and more about the weight of the evidence. No one wanted to defend such clear violations. Security was summoned to escort Sarah from the building. Her belongings would be sent to our home. As she left, her expression was a storm of anger, shame, disbelief, and a dawning realization that she'd been thoroughly outmaneuvered. Everything unfolded as I had anticipated. The very next day, David Callan tendered his resignation, clearly hoping to escape the repercussions. He severed all ties with Sarah, preferring to protect his marriage and salvage his name rather than remain by her side, a predictable move from someone who exploited both his position and personal relationships. Within days, Sarah moved out, taking only her own possessions. I wasted no time and filed for divorce, citing irreconcilable differences instead of infidelity, as I had no intention of turning our private lives into a legal battleground. The prenuptial agreement, complete with its fidelity clause, ensured a clean and uncomplicated split of our assets. Over the ensuing weeks, Sarah called me repeatedly, her tone oscillating between desperate pleas for forgiveness and bitter accusations. I let each of her calls slip by unanswered, only listening to her voicemails with a sort of detached professionalism. I observed the evolution in her voice, first bewildered, then furious, and finally, desperate. In her words, I could hear the familiar steps of grief. She was grieving not just the tangible losses, but also the security she had always assumed was hers, along with the future she'd gambled away so carelessly. While she struggled to come to terms with it all, I focused all my energy on revitalizing Elysium. The company had always had solid foundations, but had suffered from years of lackluster leadership. I set about overhauling the organization, reallocating resources to departments that consistently delivered results, and enticing some of the best talent from our competitors, including several employees poached directly from Vertex. There was a certain irony I couldn't ignore. The very firm that once cast me aside now watched as its own top performers left to work under me. Brandon and the investors were ecstatic as our improved quarterly figures reflected the impact of these changes. In just 6 months, Elysium's share value jumped by 22%, drawing the attention of industry experts who had previously written us off. Occasionally, acquaintances in the industry would pass along news about Sarah. Because our sector was so tightly knit, her dramatic exit from Elysium had left a mark that followed her everywhere, making it difficult for her to secure new employment. Eventually, she took a lower-paying position with a minor company in another state, accepting both a demotion and a reduced salary. David's fate was somewhat better. After a short period consulting, he landed a spot at a startup and seemed largely unaffected. Men like him always seem to bounce back, though I heard that his marriage didn't survive the fallout, despite the fact that he and Sarah had already parted ways. Witnessing their struggles brought me no sense of victory. The thirst for retribution that had fueled me in the beginning had faded, replaced by a colder, steadier sense of balance, a belief that, in some way, justice had been served. I had managed to turn betrayal into possibility and transform humiliation into achievement. While the financial rewards and renewed respect were gratifying, what mattered most was reclaiming control over my own destiny. On the anniversary of my dismissal from Vertex, I found myself standing in my corner office, watching dusk settle over the city skyline. My assistant had left a bottle of champagne on my desk, accompanied by a note congratulating me on the record-setting quarter. Although I hadn't planned any celebration as I reflected on the past year, it felt fitting to mark the moment. I poured myself a solitary glass and raised it in a private salute, not to victory or revenge or even survival, but to the unexpected gift Sarah and Vertex had given me, the chance to prove my own resilience and rebuild my life with greater integrity and clarity. At that moment, my phone buzzed with a text from Claire, the architectural engineer I'd been dating for the last couple of months. Claire was sharp, spoke her mind, and valued honesty, traits I'd come to prize far more than the superficial charms that had first attracted me to Sarah. "Still on for dinner at 8? I have updates on the Tokyo project," she'd written. Smiling, I quickly confirmed. For once, the past was right where it belonged. It was over, a concluded chapter in a story now opening toward more promising horizons. As I gathered my things, my reflection in the window caught my attention. I barely recognized myself, more confident, calmer, and somehow at peace. The person who had once stood, dazed in his bedroom, clutching a severance letter while his wife mocked his misfortune, seemed to belong to another lifetime. That earlier version of myself had been at the mercy of events. The person I had become was shaped by his choices, his determination, and his ability to create something better from the wreckage. What I finally understood was that true revenge didn't lie in destroying Sarah's career or happiness, but in refusing to let her dictate the direction of my life. Real victory was found in the act of rebuilding, in forging a life richer and more meaningful than what was lost. Leaving the office, I turned off the lights, leaving the empty champagne glass behind. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new opportunities, and fresh moves in the ever-changing game of business and of life. For the first time in a long while, I was genuinely excited for what the future held. The checkmate I had orchestrated had never really been about defeating Sarah on her own terms. It was always about freeing myself to pursue a more authentic existence, a life where achievement wasn't measured by someone else's failure, but by my own growth, resilience, and capacity for joy. That, I realized as the elevator doors slid shut, was the truest and most unexpected form of revenge. Not just surviving betrayal, but thriving because of it. To transform pain into power, setbacks into opportunities for renewal. To write a new story in which those who tried to bring you down become nothing more than distant figures in the prologue of your ultimate success. Our story has come to an end. What do you think about this story? Share your thoughts in the comments. And if you enjoyed the way I tell stories, head over to my channel and check out my other videos. May the force be with you. See you soon, my friend.